Okay, hi everybody. So thanks a lot. Welcome back, Brian. And I'll kick this off with a couple of questions. Maybe we could get a couple chairs out here to sit in. Even though we can all hear each other in this room, we're going to be live streaming this and archiving it. So when we get to the place where we're passing around the microphone, if you could just speak into it, that'll help with that aspect of it. Thank you, sir.
Anybody fall asleep?
No, so good.
So first off, I'll just kick it off with a couple of questions. First of all, thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure, thank you.
In speaking with you and working with you to set up the Banksy exhibits and working on the films and so on, I know that you lead a very interesting life. And I just wonder if you can give us kind of a taste of how you got into working on these street art projects, what you have going on now, and maybe some of the projects coming up in the future.
How I got into it, I had like a really boring corporate job, and I was always involved in art, but I was literally like suit, tie, corporate job in San Francisco, beginning in about 2005, which was when the street art movement really started to gain steam. And San Francisco was, for street artists from all over the world, it was their favorite city to come to because you could go out on the street, put anything up, and as long as you didn't shoot anybody, the police left you alone. So, you know, a lot of the artists in Saving Banksy were artists that spent time in San Francisco, and I got to know them. You know, Ben Ein was the first international street artist I ever met, and was immediately fascinated by what they did and the art genre, and became friends with all these international street artists. You know, Ben Ein, Black Larat, Harakoot, Roa, who's did the rat paintings in this film, and you know, had a business background and knew about contracts. And as they got bigger and started getting gallery shows and people were paying them for their work, I would start getting questions from street artists about, hey, I didn't get paid by this gallery. What should I do? Or can you help me drop a contract? And by the beginning of 2013, I realized I'm kind of unofficially managing like a dozen of the world's top street artists, and I hate my job. So I left my very nice, very comfortable job in San Francisco to work with street artists. And since that time, I've gotten to do all these amazing projects, you know, giant murals with Fade 47, who's an amazing artist out of Cape Town, South Africa, and downtown San Francisco. I've done murals, either coordinated or worked on murals ranging in size from 10 feet by 10 feet to 17 stories tall. In places like Waco, Texas, Toronto, Canada, Calgary, Canada. I just got back from helping coordinate 10 artists at a big music festival in Columbus, Ohio over the weekend. We had 10 towers built that were 8 by 16 feet tall. And we painted all four sides of these 10 towers over the course of 7 days, along with all the stage scrims, stage fencing, brought in sculpture, had artists doing live painting for 112,000 people over 3 days that came through. So I'm here to create the Banksy up, and then I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I go home to Nashville for 2 days, and then I go to Cleveland to work with Risk, who's in Saving Banksy, doing a mural and opening a graffiti center there. And then I go to Toronto to work on the movie and work on a mural project in Toronto. And then I go to LA to work on projects. So, you know, I left a very boring corporate job, and now I'm on the road all the time, coordinating an art project that can range anything from Risk, who I do a lot of work with, who's the godfather of West Coast graffiti. We just did, spur of the moment on a Thursday, I got a call from the band Blink 182's management. we want to use Risk's art for the cover of Blink-182's new album. And we need to do a lyric video, a music video with their song, which is being released on Wednesday. Can you coordinate that? So in the course of about 4 days, we did the lyric video, the music video for their first single, and the cover art for Blink-182's new album. So it could be anything.
I don't know if this one's back on. Yeah. So second question before we open it up. In showing the Banksy here, people came from far and wide to see it and left us a lot of comments, gave us a lot of good conversation. The comments were interesting. You could categorize them in different ways. One of them would be just kind of an unwavering, almost dogmatic, street art belongs on the street, not in a gallery, get this out of here, to I can't believe I have the opportunity to see this. This is amazing. Thank you so much. But a more nuanced and interesting to me kind of category was, I feel conflicted about street art, and yet I was so compelled to come and see this. I couldn't keep myself from coming. You maybe more than anybody, since you've shown the Banksy beats all around the country, and all of the work that you do with street artists, may have encountered this kind of magnetism or draw to street art. And I wonder if you have, kind of any insight in that phenomenon, and just, what do you think the value of street art is today?
Street art does belong in the street, and I'm still conflicted about whether I should have just left the rat on the wall, knowing that it would be gone forever if I had, versus trying to use it as a way to, draw attention to the street art movement and get people excited about the street art movement. I always take, whether it's right or wrong, from the artists, especially the artists that work with Banksy. I'm lucky in that I get to, work with a lot of artists that do know Banksy and work with Banksy, and universally they all said, hey, it's fine. As long as you don't sell it, it's fine. Because you are promoting street art and graffiti in places where people wouldn't ever get to see a Banksy. So in an ideal world, that rat would still be on the side of that building in San Francisco, and people would respect it and touch it, but we knew that wasn't going to happen. It was going to be gone. So it's balancing. The original intent was it belongs in this space. Taking art out of context is never an easy thing to do, but the greater good is we've been able to literally get mural programs going in places like Waco, Texas, and Kokomo, Indiana, and Windsor, Canada, and open the eyes of a lot of people that never would have been exposed to not just Banksy, but street art in general in different cities around the world. I mean, my mother, who's 86, is a street art and graffiti fanatic now, right? And that all came because of the rat. So, the general public, I think, recognizes the benefit of it. There are some artists that, are critical, not the artists that work with Banksy necessarily, but there are some people out there that, for one reason or another, say, it's the wrong thing. But I take my cues from people that know Banksy and people that have worked with him, people that are really recognized as pioneers in the street art graffiti world, and they all universally not only say it's a good thing, but have helped promote the movie. They're in the movie. They're the people that reach out to me now and say, can you help me with projects? So, hopefully it's a good thing.
Thank you. We have Holly, I believe, with a microphone floating around. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
So if you could just raise your hand, Holly will come out and find you and give you a microphone so you can ask your question. Hopefully we have some questions ready to go.
Hi, I understand that this might be, not the point of the project, but if people do have a curiosity about the art that maybe they didn't see in the video, is there an archive somewhere that people can, experience more than what you were able to show? I know I saw in the list Dennis McNett, ODU alumni, way to go. And I am personally curious as to what he contributed. So I just, I'm curious.
I'm not sure about the specific person you're talking about. The funny thing is, the artist had, there are lots of photos. They did a really good job of like documenting this. When they approached me, I wasn't aware of the project, right? When they approached me, I loved the story, but I was like, how are we gonna do a documentary if all the paintings are gone? They had photographed everything. And the plan was to put a book out, and they'd actually laid the book out and ready to publish. And then the police swooped in, and the attorney that you saw, Stacy, said, don't put a book out. So our hope is we can get the book published and the book, re-released when the movie comes out. And then the other thing is we're looking at, can't talk a lot about it, but some of the urban culture magazines and some of the art magazines are really interested in the project, and we plan to release, photos and that sort of thing to them. And we will have a website that will have some of the videos. You're 103 artists, so you only get a little taste of the time lapse. I think they got time lapse. Camera malfunctioned a couple of times, but we couldn't put 103 individual pieces of art in a movie. It would have been too long. So at some point, the goal or the hope is that all the time lapses would be available, categorized by artist, all the photos, all of that would be available, on the Underbelly website when we get that ready to roll out.
Other questions? Surely there's some. In front.
Hello. Hey. My name is Henry. Thanks for coming by, Brian. I wanted to ask you if you're working on any projects that you can't currently talk about or acknowledge, and if you are, how many? And if there are that many, how many will be coming to light eventually soon, maybe?
The reason that the artists did Underbelly was beginning in about 2009, and Fail talks about it, there was this crazy explosion commodification of artwork, of street art and graffiti, where galleries wanted it and people would hire people to do murals. And these artists all of a sudden didn't have to do anything illegal anymore. They were successful. And that was a real conflict for them, because the illegal stuff is really the soul of their art. And the idea behind Underbelly is, let's do one last big thing, because going forward into the future, we really jeopardize too much by doing illegal things. And so this was sort of our, let's do one last big project before we go off and do illegal things. So, I've done illegal art projects in the past. I mean, I've gone in San Francisco, scaled up fire escapes with artists to put wheat pastes up and things like that. I've done that. And it's a rush. It's a lot of fun. It's really the soul of why these guys do what they do. But there's such a demand for their work. And if you're an art collector and you don't have street art and graffiti in your collection, you're missing the boat. It's the next big thing. It's already a big thing. I don't know if you're aware, but there's a street artist out of New York named Kaws, K-A-W-S. Anybody ever heard of Kaws? Yeah, he was Ron English's studio assistant. One of his paintings sold at auction in April for $14.5 million. If you could wind the clock back to Andy Warhol's first exhibit of the soup cans, the original soup cans, they sold one for $100. Those now you can't touch for less than $17.5 million. So as much as they like to do illegal things and they'll test it out, there's not a lot of big illegal projects going on right now, because they're legitimate, successful, important contemporary artists. I'm trying to think if I have anything illegal planned. I don't think I do, unfortunately.
Thank you. I think we had one close down front here.
Hi, I just had a kind of a clarification question from the film, which was all the artists didn't get to see the space or any photographs of it or anything like that before they went down there. Because there was one part of the film where it kind of showed some like photos that they had taken of like artist space 1, 2, 3, and then I think later it had said that maybe people weren't able to see them before they went down there.
They would show them photos of the space. And Jordan says that they'd meet with the artists, right, at either Logan's studio or Jordan's apartment, and they would show them photos, but you could not go into the space to scout it, right? Logan Hicks could be a military general, right? He's very precise and very structured. Wonderful guy, one of my favorite artists. Love him to death. And Logan is so precise. You see it in his art. If you can do, 8-layer stencils like that and make them look as photorealistic as you do, you have to be pretty precise and structured. And so they would take them through a routine. You see in the film where he says, if you don't have a flashlight, we've got some extra. They would do a meeting and run everybody through. Here are photos. Here's what it's going to, but what they wouldn't let anybody do is go down and scout it, go down and visit it beforehand. Once you got in there and you got your piece done, you weren't coming back. That was against the rules. It's like you get one shot. We'll give you as much information as we can before you go into the space, but you can't go into the space before you do your work.
Thank you.
Hi, I have a couple things for you. Now that all of the artists that were in the movie are successful, what's the new generation of street artists? What are they doing? What's their culture like? What's coming up? And then I was also wondering if you have been able to see any of Norfolk's street art, and what do you think?
I haven't seen any of your art here. I know that there's a mural thing in Virginia Beach right now that somebody that I work occasionally with has been involved with in the past. And she was actually helping coordinate the music festival in Ohio last week. And she said, I know you're rushing off to do another thing, but you got to go to Virginia Beach and see the 10 murals in 10 days thing. So when we set the rat up, I literally was in between two projects, came in one night, it was delivered, got it set up and left. So I haven't, unfortunately, seen what you have here. Every place I go, I strongly encourage communities to really embrace it and do as much as you can. And it's not just murals. There are street artists that do sculpture. There are street artists that do performance art. There are all kinds of installation things that you can do. But any form of art is better than a blank wall, in my opinion. And, more and more communities, I showed the Banksy in Waco, Texas last year, and they were so excited, and they went out and they organized a local mural. And I got a call from them, from the people that organized it. And they said, we want to bring an artist in. Well, I was doing this project with Black Barat, and we were literally going from Tennessee to Texas to do a thing in Austin, and we had 3 days available. And I said, well, I can bring Black Barat in, and we'll do, his life-size murals. We'll do, 3 to 6 of them, depending on how much time we have in 3 days in Waco. And they said, absolutely. And they got the money together, literally in 24 hours. They got the money together, got us a place to stay, coordinated everything, did a reception. And it was a wonderful thing. Black loved it. We had so much fun. But it's that sort of passion, communities are doing it now everywhere. It's so prevalent in places like New York and Miami and LA that I think they're a little jaded at this point. It's like, oh, another mural. But, I started a project. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. When I left San Francisco, left my job. I don't know why. I moved to Nashville and then never spent any time there. But we started a mural project in Nashville called the Nashville Walls Project. And we've done 60 murals there since May of 2016. Local artists and international artists. Artists like Harakut out of Germany, Rowan out of Australia, Shu out of Amsterdam, Guido Van Helten, who, if you're not familiar with Guido, look his work up. Guido specializes in monster-sized photorealistic murals of local people. He painted a realistic mural, photorealistic mural of a man that is 91 years old, has lived in the same house in this neighborhood in Nashville, Tennessee, and does work with kids. It's 178 feet tall. And it's become an icon now in Nashville. Everybody talks about, they call it the silo murals on an old abandoned grain elevator. That was transformative for that part of Nashville. And it's a real statement. You know, that mural's been written about in the Huffington Post, and I forget how many, it's been written about in over 100 international publications. It's just that important to the community. So it's super important that communities embrace it. And then the other thing is, you know, everybody thinks it should be a government organized, city organized, you know, city officials organizing it. We do those. Everything we've done, whether it's in Nashville or Waco or some other city, are local people and local people and local businesses getting together to get it done, funding it, providing the walls, providing the support, that sort of thing, right? And it's more universally accepted by the community if people know their tax money isn't paying for it, that it's supported by individuals in the community. That's really important. That's the quickest way to get things done. You had another question too, didn't you?
It was, just.
Oh, about the
where you
new generation?
Yeah, what's the new generation?
One of the reasons why street art and graffiti are hugely important art movements is because of social media. It's the first art movement that everybody can see, right? Like I said before, you had to go to a gallery or museum or something like that generally in the past to see art. Now it's on social media, it's on Instagram, it's on Facebook, people see it. And there's a whole generation of young people that live for it now. It's when you talk about, like, you know, my son's 24, and when I first started doing this in 2000, you know, really getting into it like 2008, I'll never forget, there was a show on, I think it was on Hulu or Showtime, it was called The Get Down. Does anybody remember the show The Get Down? It was about the birth of the hip hop movement and graffiti in New York, you know, and they had all these characters. Will Smith's son was in it. But it was these two camps of kids that were interested in breakdancing and hip hop, and kids that were interested in the graffiti movement. And they would, you know, chase graffiti artists around to see their new work. And my son came, his bedroom is down in the basement, and he came right up the stairs one day and he says, "Did you say you knew Doe's Green?" I said, "Yeah, I know Doe's Green." He said, they're talking about Doe's Green on The Get Down. Right? So, I mean, he loved that. He's fascinated by that. I had a reporter from Art in America magazine call me, I don't know, about a year and a half ago. When I'm in Nashville, I sit at this Starbucks. That's my office. And Carol calls me and she says, "I'm doing this article about how kids now, anybody under like age 35 doesn't care about art anymore. And what's your take on that?" And I said, "You're wrong. You couldn't be more wrong." She said, "Why do you say that?" And I said, I'm guessing they're in like high school or in college. There are 4 people sitting across from you in Starbucks, all, you know, high school age or college age. And every one of them on their Apple laptops has a Keith Haring sticker, a Basquiat sticker, a Banksy sticker, something art related, you know, sticker on their computer. And one of them was wearing a shepherd's obey, had an obey hat on. I said, that alone, it should tell you they're super into this and they're super interested. Now, that means a lot of artists, there's always this rush, right? It's popular, it's hot, it's important. And so everybody now wants to be a street artist or graffiti artist. What's going to come out of that is some really good stuff. Who and what they're going to do, I don't know yet, right? And there will be a lot of people where it doesn't work out. That's happened in every art movement. But there are absolute masters at both street art and graffiti worldwide now. I can go down a list of about 25 artists that will be in, you know, the Museum of Modern Art in New York. They will be in the Whitney. They'll be in the Tate, Tate Modern in London. two of the most successful museum shows of the past 100 years were street art shows. Art in the Street at the LA MoCA back in 2012 was the most successful museum show, I think on record. Literally sold out lines around the block for like 4 months. And it was because, Banksy was in that. A lot of the guys in this movie, Ron English was in it, Fail was in it. It's super important to the younger generation because they see it on social media. It's shared so much. People are exposed to the art and they see it walking down the street. It's important. So.
Thank you.
Have time for a couple more before we head across the street. There will be food at the Gordon Galleries too, so be sure and join us there. Any other questions? Surely there's one or two. In the back.
Thank you for being here with us, Brian. TJ Thompson, a grad student here in the Humanities program. Question I have, it sounds kind of like you decided to drop out of kind of technocratic society from your corporate day job in San Francisco, whereas a lot of these street artists are being elevated into technocratic society. I wonder if you could talk a little more about that and how that is treated as far as these people. I mean, some people might call it selling out in lay people's terms, but how is that treated in the street art world, and what are you seeing as the paradigm shifts here?
I asked, when I was in San Francisco, how many of you are familiar with Ben Eine? Does anybody know who Ben Eine is? If you saw Saving Banksy, he's the British guy that Banksy worked with, wears glasses and has guilty tattooed across his neck. Well, Ben was living in San Francisco, and there's a very famous graffiti street artist from San Francisco named Barry McGee. And Barry was having a solo show at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. They had buses with advertising for Barry's show all over San Francisco. And some of the new graffiti guys, young street artists, would take black spray paint and write "sellout" across the advertisements for Barry's show. And I asked Ben about that. I said, what do you think about that? And Ben said, the people that say that artists are selling out, the artists that do that are the artists that aren't making any money, right? It's a jealousy thing. And I sat through this long panel discussion back in November in Austin, Texas, with a bunch of very famous street graffiti artists. Every single question was, if you're showing in galleries and you're commercially successful, then you're not a real street artist, you're not a real graffiti artist. I just reject that. I just reject it. Every artist wants to be successful, and commercial success has benefits. Working with Risk went from the guy that was the first guy to tag billboards and buses and freeway overpasses in LA to, we just installed a solo exhibit of his neon work, working with neon as sort of a sculptural element of the California Museum of Art, right? If he was still just running around the street doing graffiti, he wouldn't be able to do things like he did this whole sculptural series called Face Your Fears, which, working with Ed Moses, who's a very famous California artist and a Buddhist, Risk worked with Ed Moses and noticed that Ed used spiders a lot in his work. And he said, why do you use spiders? And he said, it's a Buddhist thing. He said, you're supposed to face the things you fear the most. So Risk went and got a real LA police car, right? Actual LA police car, and had a special saw built, and he cut it in half lengthwise. It's literally sawed right in half lengthwise. And he put it in a frame a la Damien Hirst and the Shark, and it's called it's a sculptural thing. It's called Face Your Fears. It's been shown at the LA Art Show. We just showed it at the Music Festival in Columbus. It's a killer statement. You can't build the $40,000 saw to cut the police car in half if you're just a graffiti artist. With commercial success and money comes more than just being able to put your kids in good school, and feed your family and live a more comfortable lifestyle, it opens up all kinds of new territory for these guys as artists. And really successful former graffiti artists, whether it's Retina or Evoke or Risk or Cause, go down the list. Now we're doing, serious museum shows and that sort of thing. What you see in their artwork is fine art, it's contemporary art, it's not just graffiti. So that commercial success feeds the creative process and it takes them in a new direction, which is good for the art world in general, in my opinion. But it's the one thing, because I've heard it so many times from people, if you're not struggling and you're not doing just politically based stuff on the street, illegal, you're not a real street artist or graffiti artist. That's not the case at all. It doesn't have to be, and the other thing is it has to be political. It doesn't have to be political. Nothing wrong with just putting something beautiful on a wall. It doesn't all have to have a social message or a political message, but just doing something beautiful that people are going to enjoy. That's going to be a surprise when you walk around the corner and you see a mural that you didn't expect. And it's just beautiful. It doesn't have to have a social message or a political message behind it.
Any others? Last call, any takers? Brian, before the film, you and I were speaking and you were saying some very interesting things, making a distinction between graffiti and street art as it's understood today. I wonder if we could just close with you saying a little bit about that.
Does anybody know the difference between graffiti and street art? It's funny, never call a graffiti artist a street artist. They're two entirely different things. Now that said, 90% of all street artists started off as graffiti artists. Graffiti is a subculture, right? Very strict rules in the graffiti world, right? If you're a graffiti artist, you take on a name. Like, I manage Risk. That's his graffiti name. His real name is Kelly Graval. But when he started off doing graffiti, he decided his graffiti name was Risk, R-I-S-K. And when you're a graffiti artist, that's what you put on the wall, R-I-S-K, or some variation of that, or your crew name. He was in WCA for a while, and MSK. So you could paint your crew letters, you paint your graffiti name in different colors, different styles, different fonts, different sizes, different places. But if you're a graffiti artist, you're doing your tag or some variation of that, right? That's what you do. The other thing that graffiti artists will tell you is they don't care what civilians think. You're all civilians. They don't care what you think. What they do, where they do it, how they do it to impress other graffiti artists. It's a very competitive thing, right? They don't care. Graffiti artists, the culture started off as, we don't care if we get a gallery show, because that's not what we're about. It's opened other doors for them. Street artists, entirely different. Street artists, there are fewer rules, right? If you want to do something figurative, do something figurative. You can have a specific style, but you're not limited to, sort of that graffiti code, that subculture, and you do care what the general public thinks. Street artists want to get a reaction from the general public. In short version, that's the difference. And there are really different levels. There are taggers, the guys that go around with pins and just write on stuff. That's sort of the very beginning of graffiti, is tagging. So there are taggers and there are graffiti artists and there are street artists. Street artists are very happy to tell you, like Guido Van Helten, the guy that does the giant murals, started off as a graffiti artist in Australia tagging trains. And he's developed into this amazing photorealistic sepia tone color palette, painting photorealistic people. His largest murals in Finland, not 195 feet tall, but started off tagging trains in Australia. But left that because he wanted to do something that was different and outside the rules that generally you have with graffiti art. Now that said, graffiti art started street art. Without graffiti, there would be no street art. Street art developed from graffiti. And to me, graffiti is a very pure art form. Very pure art form. It's all about craft and dedication, taking risks and, and having a code. Street art is a lot looser. Do whatever you want to do. Do it as big as you can do it. Do it, photorealistic. Do just colors and patterns. Do whatever you want to do. It's more wide open. Does that make sense?
Isn't tagging developed from gangs? The gangs would tag. There's
Yeah, graffiti. I'm going to do an oversimplification. Graffiti, as you know it, has nothing to do with gangs. When you go to LA, I spend a lot of time in LA, and I can show people the MS-13 tags. You see them. They don't care what it looks like. They're simply marking territory, right? I don't care if it looks good. Then it's not like it's either red or black or orange paint, one color. It's scrawled on there. Graffiti, because of the nature, especially in LA, of the culture, when graffiti really started in the early 80s through the 90s, in places like Hollywood and places like that. Hollywood wasn't cool. It wasn't nice. It wasn't glamorous in the early 80s. It was super rough. And because of the situation in the school, in the communities in LA in the early 80s, a lot of graffiti members were in gangs, absolutely. And there were some early stylized elements that came from sort of Old English calligraphy and that sort of thing that used to be a part of some of the Hispanic gang culture. But what you see from gangs on the walls in places like LA is not graffiti, not even close. Graffiti artists are artists. The difference is they use aerosol instead of a brush, and they paint on walls because most of the time they had no other place to paint. And they wanted to get their, they wanted to do things to impress other graffiti artists. But, the idea that graffiti is a gang thing couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, there are graffiti artists in LA that will tell you back in the 80s when they first started doing this, the gangs would try and kill them because they didn't know what are these guys? They're marking our territory. And now graffiti artists can go into most gang territory. I see graffiti art in MS-13 areas in LA, and they don't care. It's just like, this is art, guys. They're not marking territory. Two entirely different worlds, and they're really, if they overlap at all, it's a minor overlap.
Well, thanks everyone for the questions, and please do join us right across the street in the Gordon Galleries on Monarch Way. Again, have a snack, meet Brian in person, see the Banksy one final time, take some photos, and help me thank Brian.
Oh, thank you.